How could one man, alone, make an entire empire tremble to its very foundations? Rome, seemingly invincible, suddenly faced a looming shadow rising from the heart of Africa. A formidable force, riding majestic war elephants and driven by an unyielding hatred. He was no mere king, nor a deity. He was a brilliant strategist, tasked with what seemed an impossible mission, to dismantle Rome from its bedrock. Today, we delve into the epic saga of the general who not only conquered the treacherous Alps, but also decimated entire Roman legions, challenging the might of the ancient world through sheer, indomitable will. His name, Hannibal Barca, the eternal nemesis of the Roman Empire. But before we embark on this gripping journey of betrayals, brutal wars, and forgotten glories, remember to subscribe to our channel, share this video, and let us know in the comments which other historical figures you'd be eager to see brought to life in this cinematic format. Now, prepare yourselves to traverse the formidable Alps alongside antiquity's most feared general. Across the verdant lands of Latium, a city was rapidly ascending, growing into an unstoppable colossus. Rome, a city forged in the crucible of myth and driven by boundless ambition, had evolved into a disciplined, ruthless, and insatiable war machine. Its army did not march merely with blades. It advanced with an unwavering conviction. Each victory laid another foundational stone for an empire destined to recognize no bounds. They conquered diverse peoples, dismantled ancient kingdoms, and executed their expansion with near-surgical precision. Wherever Rome's legions arrived, local languages were swiftly silenced, ancestral customs ruthlessly crushed, and a new law, their law, was imposed with the overwhelming weight of its formidable military. Yet, not all populations yielded so readily. On the opposite shores of the Mediterranean Sea, a rival city gleamed with its own distinct brilliance. This was Carthage, founded centuries earlier by resourceful Phoenician settlers, standing proudly on the northern coast of Africa. Far from an ordinary kingdom, Carthage was a formidable naval power, overflowing with wealth from extensive trade, vast reserves of gold, and immense ambition. It commanded vital sea routes, amassed unimaginable riches, and initially extended its influence without the direct clash of swords. At least, not at first. While Rome relentlessly expanded its dominion by land, Carthage exerted unparalleled supremacy over the seas. Two colossal powers inherently destined to collide. The delicate balance of power across the Mediterranean region tightened precariously, much like a great bow drawn taut, poised to unleash its deadliest arrow. Tensions mounted inexorably until both nations, with their vast armies, resorted to the only language they truly understood and respected: war. The ensuing Punic Wars transcended mere territorial disputes. They were epic-defining struggles for the very soul of the ancient world. And while this particular chapter merely heralds the genesis of a monumental narrative, it was already evident that the destinies of millions would be irrevocably shaped by the grand ambitions of a select few. Rome appeared utterly unstoppable. Yet, an ominous shadow began to creep over the horizon, one that even its most perceptive oracles had not foreseen. What if Rome's most formidable adversary emerged not from the east, but from the south, leading an army of war elephants? While Roman legions ruthlessly crushed cities and resistance across the Italian peninsula, on the distant side of the sea, a brilliant jewel of a city gleamed under the African sun. Its name was Carthage, and its epic narrative commenced not with a march of soldiers, but with the voyages of intrepid sailors. Established around 814 BC by enterprising Phoenician settlers hailing from Tyre, Carthage rapidly flourished into a vibrant metropolis of astute merchants, cunning negotiators, and unparalleled seafarers. Its unparalleled strategic position in North Africa transformed it into the coveted gateway to the immense riches of the ancient world. Gold, precious ivory, exotic spices, human chattel, and valuable metals continuously streamed through its bustling ports. While Rome meticulously forged its empire with the raw strength of iron, Carthage skillfully enriched itself through the intricate arteries of commerce. But inevitably, power begets power, and soon Carthage transcended its role as a mere trading hub. It began to assert its dominance through conquest. They established flourishing colonies in strategic locations like Sicily and Sardinia, aggressively expanded their sphere of influence along the Iberian coast, and effectively subdued entire peoples across the southern Mediterranean. Their naval fleet was legendary, an engineering marvel. No rival city-state could ever hope to match their undisputed command of the sea. And then Rome arrived. The simmering tensions between these two burgeoning powers quickly mounted, dark and menacing, like tempestuous storms on the horizon. The Romans, driven by an insatiable eagerness to expand their dominion, immediately recognized a prime opportunity in Sicily. But Carthage, with its established presence, was already firmly entrenched. What initially manifested as minor political disputes and localized skirmishes soon inexorably escalated into a brutal, full-scale conflict, the First Punic War. For over 2 grueling decades, the waters of the Mediterranean were tragically stained with blood. Carthage, naturally, relied heavily on its superior fleet. Yet Rome, despite its complete inexperience at sea, audaciously constructed a formidable navy from scratch. They learned with astonishing speed, and when the newly built Roman ships began decisively sinking Carthaginian vessels at the pivotal Battle of the Aegates Islands, the entire balance of power dramatically shifted. Carthage ultimately lost Sicily. It was compelled to pay crushing, humiliating tributes and forced to withdraw from several key territories. But the most insidious outcome was not the military defeat itself. It was the bitter, enduring resentment it irrevocably planted. In the bustling streets of Carthage, amidst its grand columns and vibrant markets, the very name of Rome was uttered with unvarnished hatred. The imposed peace treaty brought not calm, but a simmering, silent fury. Among the most enraged citizens was one man in particular, a general who would neither forget nor forgive. His name was Hannibal Barca, and his meticulously conceived plan would irrevocably alter the course of history. The war had formally concluded, at least on paper. Carthage, profoundly defeated in the First Punic War, had been compelled to cede Sicily, pay exorbitant tribute, and grudgingly accept Roman naval supremacy across the Mediterranean. But what appeared as mere ink on parchment was in reality a venomous seed of hatred planted deep within the wounded heart of Carthaginian pride. For the proud people of Carthage, those terms were not merely unfair. They were an unbearable insult. The treaty, therefore, did not signify the end of an era, but rather the bitter beginning of an epoch of relentless humiliation. Every tribute demanded, every forced concession, every Roman claim felt like an open wound that stubbornly refused to heal. And at the epicenter of this burgeoning resentment stood a man whose patience had utterly fractured, Hannibal Barca, a seasoned war veteran, an uncompromising strategist, and a fierce, unyielding defender of Carthaginian honor. Hannibal perceived in defeat not a reason for surrender, but a vital lesson. While Carthage's politicians desperately sought stability and peace, Hannibal meticulously plotted a path to profound revenge. He understood implicitly that confronting Rome once more would necessitate a new, potent source of power, one far from Rome's ever-watchful eyes, beyond its immediate reach. The solution, he determined, lay to the north, the resource-rich Iberian Peninsula. Abundant in valuable minerals, timber, robust livestock, and a ready supply of fierce mercenary soldiers, Hispania, as it was then known, offered everything Carthage required for its resurgence. Hannibal marched into this new land not merely as an invader, but as the visionary architect of a renewed Carthaginian empire. Through relentless fire and calculated blood, he systematically subdued local tribes, founded new cities, and transformed the region's rich silver mines into an inexhaustible wellspring of wealth for his sacred cause. Yet, this grand enterprise was more than just military strategy. At the very core of this ambitious new project, Hamilcar brought with him his eldest son, a boy possessed of a fierce gaze and an indomitable spirit, Hannibal. He meticulously trained his son not only in the intricate arts of warfare, but more profoundly in the art of consuming hatred. He instilled in Hannibal the belief that Rome was not merely a rival nation. It was an existential threat to Carthage's very existence. And during a solemn, clandestine ritual, he made his young son swear an oath that would forever seal his destiny, never to be a friend of the Romans. That boy indeed would grow. His legendary name would echo through the centuries. But in that defining moment, he was merely a living promise, the solemn promise that Carthage would indeed rise again. And this time, its resurgence would not be by sea, but by an altogether unexpected path. Indeed, the greatest stories do not always commence with the thunder of battle. Sometimes, everything truly begins with a sacred oath, whispered in the deepest shadows. Hannibal was a mere 9-year-old boy when his father, Hamilcar Barca, led him into the solemn depths of a Carthaginian temple. There were no witnesses, no grand speeches, only a father, his young son, and a consuming fire fueled by intense rage and deeply wounded pride. There, before the ancient gods who had silently witnessed countless empires rise and fall, the boy placed his small hand upon a sacred vessel and uttered the profound words that would irrevocably define his destiny. I will never be a friend of Rome. I will never cease fighting it. It was far more than a simple child's promise. It was the incandescent birth of an obsession, a relentless fire that would burn with unyielding intensity for decades. Hannibal was by no means an ordinary child. He came of age in the harsh military camps of Hispania, immersed in a world of weapons, intricate strategies, and heroic tales of past glories. He learned to ride a warhorse before he could even wield a pen, to expertly read complex maps before he could appreciate poetry. His rigorous education was not entrusted to gentle philosophers, but to grizzled, battle-hardened veterans. Every victory achieved by his father served as a crucial lesson, and every Roman betrayal etched itself into his mind as a bitter, indelible memory. When Hamilcar himself met his end in battle, some whispered betrayed by his Iberian allies, Hannibal's visceral hatred for Rome deepened even further. He was succeeded by his son-in-law, Hasdrubal, who diligently continued Carthage's expansion in the Iberian region. But with the passage of time, it was the formidable young Hannibal himself who ultimately took command, unequivocally acclaimed by his loyal soldiers and widely supported by the Carthaginian populace. Rome watched with escalating concern. Carthage, despite being bound by the shadow of restrictive treaties, was clearly forging something formidable in Hispania. Yet, no one within the august Roman Senate could possibly foresee the cataclysm that was rapidly approaching. No one could have imagined that this boy, born of deep-seated resentment and meticulously forged in the crucible of war, would ultimately bring the very heart of the proud Roman Republic to its knees. The distant thunder had intensified dramatically, and it was about to violently break over the unsuspecting land of Italy. When Hannibal finally assumed full command of the Carthaginian army in Hispania, the vast expanse of the Mediterranean Sea itself was no longer sufficient to contain his burning ambition. He bore a singular mission, deeply carved into his very soul, to utterly destroy Rome. And he would not passively wait for war to be brought to his doorstep. He would proactively carry the fight directly to Rome's gates. The catalyst for conflict arrived swiftly. Rome's provocative intervention in the city of Saguntum, a city allied with Rome, yet unmistakably situated within Carthaginian territory, was deemed by Hannibal an intolerable act of aggression. Without awaiting formal approval from Carthage's often hesitant Senate, he immediately gathered his seasoned troops, assembled a truly colossal military force, and began his audacious march north. What ensued unequivocally defied every accepted military logic of the era. Hannibal deliberately eschewed the conventional sea route. Instead, he chose the seemingly impossible, With an army exceeding 50,000 hardened soldiers, thousands of horses, and nearly 40 fearsome war elephants, he embarked on an epic, unprecedented journey, traversing the imposing Pyrenees, battling through southern Gaul, and finally, conquering the formidable Alps. He chose to do so in the dead of winter, venturing into deadly, uncharted terrain teeming with both relentless natural hazards and hostile human enemies. No commander had ever dared attempt such a feat before, and none would ever replicate it after. Men froze to their deaths, perishing in the brutal cold. Majestic elephants plunged into icy ravines. Yet, Hannibal persevered and arrived. When he finally descended the treacherous slopes into the heart of the Italian peninsula, Rome could scarcely believe its own eyes. He had not merely defied the physical boundaries of geography. He had utterly defied all military logic and reason itself. The Second Punic War had indeed begun, heralded by a thundering declaration of intent that reverberated across the startled hills of Italy. In the brutal months that followed, Hannibal systematically crushed the Roman legions in a series of devastating, decisive victories: the Ticinus, the Trebia, and Lake Trasimene. Each engagement was a profound humiliation for Rome. Its army, undefeated for generations, now shamefully bled profusely, and died in droves. And yet, remarkably, Hannibal did not march directly on Rome itself. Why this critical hesitation? Some historians contend he anticipated Rome's allied cities would revolt and join his cause. Others suggest he desperately needed crucial reinforcements. But with every passing day, Rome, though wounded, relentlessly prepared its defenses. Each day it did not fall. It grew more dangerous, more resilient. The brilliant Carthaginian general was winning every single battle, but he had not yet secured the war. And then came the fateful day when he would unveil to the world his greatest tactical masterpiece, a blood-soaked field known as Cannae. The scorching sun beat down relentlessly over the vast plains of southern Italy. It was the year 216 BC, and the Roman army, the largest military force ever assembled to that date, marched forth with an unshakable, almost arrogant certainty. Today, they believed they would utterly destroy Hannibal. 80,000 legionaries, fueled by the wounded pride of a desperate Senate, advanced with grim determination towards the unassuming town of Cannae. Facing them, Hannibal, commanding less than half their numbers, appeared to be hopelessly cornered. But what the overconfident Romans failed to grasp was that they were about to march headlong into one of the most ingenious and devastating traps ever conceived in military history. Hannibal profoundly understood the Roman military spirit, impetuous, direct, and ravenously hungry for glory. He meticulously engineered a deliberate provocation, presenting a seemingly weak center and feigning a desperate retreat. The Romans, blinded by their perceived advantage, eagerly took the bait and charged forward with all their formidable weight, straight into the lethal heart of the Carthaginian ambush. What followed was not merely a battle, but a meticulously orchestrated choreography of death. The Carthaginian flanks, light, swift, and perfectly synchronized, expertly enveloped the dense Roman formation from both sides. Then, the victorious Carthaginian cavalry, having routed the Roman wings, swiftly closed the deadly circle from behind. The entire Roman army was now completely, irrevocably surrounded. There was absolutely no escape. What followed was no longer a battle. It was an unspeakable massacre. In just a few horrifying hours, more than 50,000 Roman soldiers lay dead on the field. Blood flowed like rivers through the dust, which soon turned into a grotesque crimson mud. Generals, esteemed senators, elite soldiers, all perished before the meticulously directed fury of Hannibal's forces. Cannae was not merely a victory. It was a resounding, terrifying message. Rome had bled profoundly, and it was clear to all that Rome could, indeed, die. But even in this, his greatest hour of triumph, Hannibal committed the strategic error that continues to divide historians to this day. He did not march directly on Rome. Why did he not seize the moment to utterly crush the Republic at its weakest, most vulnerable point? Was it a critical lack of siege resources, a calculated long-term strategy that proved ultimately flawed, or perhaps a dangerous overconfidence? Rome, though humiliated to its core, did not collapse. Instead, it hardened, forging an unbreakable resolve. And while Hannibal savored his tactical masterpiece, a brilliant young Roman general was quietly beginning to forge the audacious plan that would eventually bring him face to face with the Carthaginian master. His name was Publius Cornelius Scipio, and he was destined to irrevocably change the entire course of the war. Rome, though grievously wounded, was far from dead. After the unmitigated tragedy of Cannae, many throughout the ancient world fully expected the city to collapse utterly. But the unthinkable, truly remarkable thing happened. The Republic, against all odds, stood firm. It swiftly raised new legions, drastically tightened its military discipline, and adamantly refused to surrender. Hannibal had indeed won the greatest battle, but decisively he had not won the war. While he stubbornly remained on Italian soil, patiently waiting for crucial alliances that ultimately never materialized, Rome quietly executed its boldest, most audacious strategic plan. Instead of continuing to bleed and fight defensively on its own sacred territory, Rome made the momentous decision to carry the war directly into the enemy's heartland. And for such an audacious endeavor, it required a new, visionary kind of general. That general was Publius Cornelius Scipio, young, brilliantly strategic, and fiercely ambitious. He had not only survived the disaster of Cannae, but had learned profoundly from every Roman defeat, now leading an unprecedented military campaign designed to first conquer Hispania and then directly invade Africa itself. Scipio systematically cut off Hannibal's vital supply lines in the Iberian Peninsula, decisively defeated his brothers in battle, and utterly shattered Carthage's ambitious expansion project there. Then, with an army invigorated and fiercely determined, he crossed the sea, preparing to confront Hannibal himself in his own African homeland. Terrified by the imminent threat, Carthage desperately summoned its final, most formidable lightning bolt, Hannibal. Thus, the legendary general reluctantly returned to Africa. Two tactical giants were finally poised to collide. Their ultimate confrontation, the battle that would decide the fate of empires, would be fought at Zama in 202 BC. He was no longer the audacious young commander who had defied the Alps. Hannibal was now a battle-weary veteran, bearing the immense weight of years of relentless war, of countless cities destroyed, and trusted allies forever lost. But even amidst his weariness, he still possessed his unparalleled military genius. Scipio knew this acutely, and so he prepared his forces with meticulous, unflinching precision. The feared Carthaginian war elephants, once an instrument of terror, were ingeniously neutralized through Scipio's innovative tactics. The Roman infantry, now hardened and seasoned by years of bitter experience, steadfastly withstood every Carthaginian charge. Moreover, the Numidian cavalry, formerly staunch allies of Carthage, now fought fiercely on Rome's side. Zama was, beyond doubt, a masterstroke of military brilliance, but this time the triumph belonged unequivocally to Rome. Hannibal was definitively defeated. Carthage, utterly devastated, was finally forced to surrender. Its once mighty fleets were burned to ashes, its formidable power irrevocably destroyed, and its grand ambition was forever buried beneath the crushing terms of harsh, punitive treaties. But Hannibal did not meet his end on that African battlefield. He vanished, becoming an elusive fugitive. He traveled through distant kingdoms and empires, always moving under the immense shadow of his legendary reputation. Relentlessly pursued by Rome, yet secretly admired by many, he transformed into a powerful symbol. A symbol of what it truly means to never surrender, to defy fate, even when the entire world seems to crumble at your feet. Carthage had been thoroughly defeated. Its formidable walls were forever silenced, its once proud fleet annihilated, and its ancient pride utterly humiliated. Yet, there remained one thing Rome, for all its might, could never truly destroy: the indomitable legend of Hannibal. Following his crushing defeat at Zama, the formidable Carthaginian general became a hunted fugitive. He traversed the vast expanses of Asia Minor, diligently sought refuge in the courts of numerous foreign kings, and readily offered his unparalleled military genius to any sovereign brave enough to openly defy the burgeoning Roman giant. But Rome, relentless and unforgiving, pursued him like an inescapable shadow. His very name, even in the ignominy of defeat, continued to inspire profound fear, for he was not merely an extraordinary commander. He was the living embodiment of Rome's deepest dread, an enemy who, under no circumstances, would ever bend or break. In his final, solitary years, cornered, stripped of a homeland, and bereft of an army, Hannibal chose a life of noble exile over the profound humiliation of capture. And according to the ancient chronicles, he chose to take his own life, rather than endure the indignity of falling into Roman hands. Even in his death, he performed one final, defiant act. But his monumental story did not conclude there. For centuries thereafter, countless strategists and generals meticulously studied his brilliant campaigns, his audacious maneuvers, and his sheer tactical boldness. Visionaries like Napoleon, Wellington, and even the commanding generals of the Second World War drew invaluable lessons from his genius. And in Rome itself, yes, even within the very heart of the empire he sought to destroy, his name was remembered with a complex mixture of horror, profound respect, and undeniable admiration. Hannibal had ultimately lost the war, but in doing so, he had gained something far more valuable: eternity. Today, his towering figure effortlessly transcends the crumbling ruins of Carthage, survives the countless ashes of subsequent wars, and continues to live on in our collective memory as an indomitable, unbreakable force. A boy who, with a sacred oath, vowed revenge, and subsequently brought the most powerful empire in the ancient world to its very knees. He was a lightning bolt that, though long extinguished, still brilliantly illuminates the annals of history. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you thoroughly enjoyed this video and are passionate about delving into this kind of compelling historical content, please subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos and can continue to discover more fascinating stories. We'll see you in the next video.